to have you on the podcast today. How you doing?
I'm doing really well, Adam. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. Obviously, we've spoken before um,
Yeah,
on kind of my podcast, so we kind of know how this goes, and we know each other a little bit already, which is really
yeah,
cool. So yeah, man, I'm really
yeah,
excited for it.
yeah. No, same here. It was really good to be on your show. It's called the Lost and Searching podcast, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
that you've got, and it was really great to be on your show. And yeah, just kind of like thought I'd introduce you and kind of go into like what you do because like, you're like a social entrepreneur. You've got lots of experience in many areas. You've helped businesses out. Kind of what kind of got you into this field of
Yeah.
like podcasting, kind of
Mm.
working with people.
Okay. That's it's kind of a funny story in a way. So, um I hit the point in my life that all of us, or most of us, I guess, hit at some point where we're kind of like, what am I doing with my life, right? Like when you're 18 and you're like, okay, what's next? I'm out of school, et cetera, et cetera. And because of the life I had had so far, there were a lot of things I knew I didn't want to do. I didn't know what I did want to do, but I knew what I didn't want to do. And so the options I felt like I was left with were things like working for an NGO, going into politics and trying to be an MP or something like that. Um, Maybe a couple other things charity wise, but basically I wanted to help people, and I hated I had so much anger as a young person towards like the systems we have in our society that I just don't think are that helpful to people. So I was in this position where I was like, what do I do? What do I want to do with my life? And I had a gap year before university. During that gap year, one of the opportunities I signed up to was something called ICS here in the UK, International Citizen Service. I don't actually know if it's still running now because our foreign aid has recently changed and stuff, but it was basically this program that brought you to um, one of several partner countries abroad where you would live and volunteer in a local village in that developing country, and kind of help in volunteering, and you live with a host family all for about 3 months. So I went to a really small village in kind of hilltop Nepal, like I want to say 5 or 6 thousand, up there. We could see the Annapurna Mountains like really clear as day. It was
Wow, yeah,
so beautiful. um and so I was there, but it was this really difficult experience for me for a lot of reasons that aren't that relevant to the story. But kind of being in this place that was this total culture shock to me, not and being in a mindset where I didn't know what I wanted to do, who I wanted to be, things like that, right? I was in this, in a way, very vulnerable state of mind. So I was there for lots of time and I had lots of time to chill and do stuff. And so I brought a lot of books with me. And one of the books I brought with me is a book called We Economy. So like economy, but with we in at the beginning instead, which I got given at an event called We Day. We've got long story short, there are these events called We Day by a charity organization called We, which is all over the world. And so this book was co-written by its founders and Holly Branson, Richard Branson's daughter. So going to this event because of some work that I did with a charity that's linked to them, I got given this book for free. So I got given this book as I walked in the door, didn't really know anything about it, didn't really care about it, brought it with me, read it because I was bored, because I had a lot of time on my hands up in the village. Um, and it talked about and introduced to me the concept of social entrepreneurship. And this was a kind of awakening moment for me. It was a moment of real realization for me, because I was like, shit, there are things I can do that aren't like, that help me help people and change my own life at the same time. So my thought process, my mentality at the time was, if I want a good life, I probably need to be a really kind of capitalist, not very nice human being who, or be in a job that I hate that pays a lot of money. And I didn't see anything except that, or doing something that paid me a lot less and didn't really change my life but helped other people. I thought that was a choice I had to make. And learning about entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship specifically, I realized I was totally wrong, that I could change the world and change my life at the same time. So when I returned, I kind of had a couple opportunities to start working in business, and with a friend and now business partner of mine, in one of his first businesses, which was essentially a youth consultancy business. So what we would do is we would bring groups of young people, mostly from disadvantaged areas in London, into organizations to help them learn about their kind of average everyday young customers. And this taught me a lot, primarily because we got to work and working really hard. We were very lucky to work with a lot of very kind of big name clients. So we've worked with AKQA, we've worked with Nike, we've worked with Nando's, we've worked with Superdry and a few others, as well as some smaller clients. But we did that for a few years, learned a lot. And on the way, I was also doing lots of self study about entrepreneurship. So, if the question is, how did I get into it? It's basically because I saw it as this opportunity to change both my life and the world by applying my creativity and the things that I love. And so I just fell in love with that concept and dove into it in every way from every angle. And that's led to kind of lots of things that I do nowadays relevant to entrepreneurship, as well as to helping other young leaders who might have been in kind of the similar position that I might have been in.
No, I love that. I love, that you found something that you really have a passion for. And I think, that experience of going, so like probably in the Himalayas or like Nepal, like in those mountains and being, you know, into the unknown and away from the norm, it's like a bit of a, it's a massive shock to the
Mm,
system.
yeah.
And, probably made you really grateful as well for what you have, and to really connect with other people
Mm,
and to really think about, in that headspace to think as well and have that time to,
yeah.
to introspect and look at the books
Mm.
and really take a lot from them.
Well, you know what? One of the funniest things that came out of it, because it's one of these really subconscious things that comes out of difficult experiences like that, is I didn't realize until later how comfortable I became with myself, and therefore how uncomfortable I was before I left. So here's a okay, let me give you a really like simple, easy example. And it's gonna sound weird, but it's super simple. So because I had a very weird life growing up, that meant I was someone who had a lot of anxiety growing up, right? One of the results of that was that I don't have anything like OCD, but almost this OCD like kind of habit before I was 18, where if I was going to leave my bedroom, I had to be wearing socks and shoes. I had to. I couldn't walk around the rest of the house. I couldn't leave the house. I wouldn't wear like sandals or flip flops or whatever. Um, in Nepal, that is impossible. It is impossible to live that way. So the first few days I was there, every time I wanted to go to the bathroom because it was outside, like I had to go out of my room, out of the main house to the bathroom, I would put on socks and shoes. And it's almost like, imagine walking to the other side of your room. To walk to the other side of your room, you need to put on socks and shoes when you were barefoot previously. Anyone would be like, what are you doing? Like, that doesn't make any sense. But that's what my brain was, to them, that's what I was doing. And eventually I was like, this is such a pain in the ass. I just gave up and stopped and started using flip-flops or just dealing with it and going barefoot. And then when I got back, I was more comfortable with my feet. I was more comfortable around the world. I was more comfortable with nature and with being barefoot. Like, I had to overcome all these little bits and pieces that made me so not confident before, or that stemmed from a lack of confidence, which meant that now, after that, um, you could throw me into all kinds of situations that you couldn't have thrown me into before. And I'd have this resilience that I didn't even know I had built up. It was like this subconscious, my brain just figured something out and was like, okay, just get used to it or get over it. I got forced to learn.
Mm, that's it. And I think, like you said, went through things and growing up, and then you develop this way of behaving, like wearing socks and shoes, and then you kind of probably for whatever reason by doing that. going somewhere where you kind of stop doing that, it's like a shift in some way, isn't it? You shifted, something clicked and fell into place, and then you
Mm,
stopped doing that. And then whether that was, I don't know, down to fear or whatever, like
yeah.
it's no longer there because you can then, hop into other
Mm,
situations and then use that energy in a different way, isn't it? And I think people should go into, situations that really push them out of their comfort zone. I think that's kind of
yeah.
where a lot of growth takes place. And I
Yeah.
think it's great you've been able to, you know, get into this work and to grow, and then, to work with really big companies and to
Yeah.
work, with some smaller companies and to help people as well. Because I think, like you said, you trying to find your way in life is, everyone has different experiences, but I
Yeah.
think for the most part, for most people, it's very difficult. And there's a lot of growth to be taken from those times. But also think, um, with the growth, there's, you just kind of end up you end up finding your way as you go along.
Mm,
And we don't always know what way we want to go. You want to go, and like you said, you thought that it was either by, in business and by being quite mean,
yeah.
which, business can be quite ruthless in areas,
Yeah.
but there are other ways of kind of, going about things.
Yeah, there's always as far as relevant to business, something I learned over time and through throwing myself into it and into self-study and just the concepts of social entrepreneurship, I learned just how effective it can be to think think like a giver, right? Think about what is genuinely best for someone else and follow that. So let me give you an example that's going to sound kind of weird, but I was having this conversation recently. Someone was telling me about what it's like to go into the games industry, right? The video games industry making games nowadays. And whereas in the gaming industry, the product started as these creations of love by the developers. Now, because the industry is so huge and is worth so much, it's very much about crunch times and short deadlines. And, people are making products that they really just don't like that much, basically. And it's very hard. A lot of overtime goes into it. It decreases product quality, it decreases community satisfaction and customer satisfaction. And the reason it happens is because people, the people in charge of these companies, they're looking for as quick of returns as they can possibly get, right? I started to believe that there's another way that still gets you as high, if not higher returns, just not as quickly, right? So that's kind of where the social entrepreneurship comes into it. If I'm okay that you haven't bought my product, because I'm not looking to get you to buy my product, I'm looking for you to have an amazing experience. And then as a result of that experience, you come back later and buy my product. That is, to me, that is much more long term, more sustainable, more enjoyable kind of result to have. But if your mindset is one that says you need to have all these short term, if you think in the short term, if you think finite, then you're going to be stuck in this place where you're battling like, am I doing the right thing? Am I getting what I want? Are my goals worth it? And if you're in business, is my business actually any good because I'm forcing my products down my customers' throats, and long term you're probably screwing over your business. That to me was a huge part of that kind of transformation and mindset for me. I knew now I'm able to make the world a better place while still being, successful in business, financially successful, personally successful, while helping others, because I'm actually just focusing on what they want. And I know for a fact, I'm confident enough to know that everything else will flow from there, right?
Yeah, definitely. No, I love that. And I think that's so true. And I think, like, that's probably where a lot of companies fail or businesses fail because they're so, or games companies, because they're so much under pressure to, get that, to financially do well from a
Yeah.
game coming out, trying to get it out quick. And then
Mm,
that just kind of leaks into the business, doesn't it? And I
of
don't know if
course.
you
Mm.
saw too much of like Cyberpunk, but what happened with that game?
That was an
Like they,
interesting story, yeah. That was and that's the thing, you took a company that basically did well because of their community, because of the love they put into their game, because of how satisfied their customers were, and then they basically said, "Fuck you," and went and did something completely different, and then surprise, surprise, everyone's unhappy. It's like you fucked with your customer base.
yeah,
But it's just it's almost like the other side of a coin, right? If I
mm,
have a coin and one side says um focus on the value you're adding to people's lives, and the other side says focus on your short-term gains, it isn't a binary decision. It is more complex than that, but it feels like a lot of the time people think it's one of the two. So in other words, we treat it like it's a dichotomy, right? Either you're doing this or you're doing that. One of my favorite sayings is that all dichotomies are false dichotomies. So, to elaborate a little bit, a dichotomy is essentially when you construct something as being an either or, right? Like a binary decision. Realistically, almost everything that we see as a binary decision, almost everything that we see as a dichotomy, really exists on a scale of some kind, right? Um, so are my customers going to be happy, or am I going to make money quickly? And somehow that's a binary decision, as if you can't make a good enough amount of money, be somewhere in the middle, making a good enough amount of money relatively quickly while still having a great connection to your customers and listening to them and adding value to their lives. It's as if that's not achievable to some people. It's just a little bit of
mm,
mindset shift. And I think that's something that getting into social entrepreneurship taught me really early on, that's had a knock-on effect on a lot of kind of the other work and successes that I've been able to have since then.
yeah. No, most definitely. No, I think like you said, like people sometimes they want that quick fix and they want to make that
Mm,
money now. And I think like I've if you go to certain um like shops or companies,
mhm,
there's that experience of how they treat you and the
mm,
product, and it's that experience like you said that then makes that person want to come back. They might not come
mhm,
back next week or next month, that they're going to come back because
mhm,
based
mhm,
on that experience and what happens. And some people don't do that, and they just kind of rush it out. And
mm,
there's that book I was reading, Science of Getting Rich, and he touches
mm,
base on that, something similar. And it
mhm.
was like it's I don't, I can't remember the word by word, but it's like the experience um that you kind of offer is more basically than just the money. Is it, do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like you're going to get
100%. Yeah,
the
it's
money
like
anyway.
I think it's like, so one fact I find really interesting is that a good experience is the number one indicator of success for a business. So, if we look at, what is success for a business, if you think that's long term, being sustainable, being profitable, some level of growth in your business, if all of that is success, and that we call that the definition of success in this context, then um, the biggest indicator of that, looking at all the things that might indicate how likely a business is to be successful, the biggest indicator ends up being how satisfied customers were with the experience. So beyond uh, quality, having a high quality product, beyond, is it at a reasonable price, or did I get it quickly? Did I have a good overall experience? Yes, then this business is probably doing pretty well. And to me, that's an important thing to take on board, or at least to learn more about, because it begs the question: what does a good experience look like, right? Um, for me, it's always been a kind of I throw the word value around a lot, because I think there's no one definition of what a good experience or good value, or I should say, of what a good experience is. Therefore, you kind of need to understand the value you're adding at every step of the way. So, say you're selling me shoes, everything from how did I find you, to how did our conversation go, to what did I get at the end of the day, how satisfied did I feel with the whole process? All of that is experience. So experience is a little more complex. Now, at the end of the day, the shoes could be slightly more expensive than the exact same pair of shoes sold by someone else, or they could be slightly worse quality than shoes that look exactly the same from someone else. But if those other people didn't get that experience right because they didn't take into account how they spoke to me, they didn't take into account their marketing channels, or the things that made me find them. You don't take these things into account, the overall experience gets a lot worse. um it's that it's that makes the reason I say that is because it comes back to this word value. What that does for me is it makes it so much easier to understand all the potential steps in that experience, because does the way I speak to you add value to you? Does the product add value to your life? Everywhere that value could be added is a place that is worth focusing on and getting right as part of your experience. Um,
Mm.
I feel like that's a good thing to feel as well, if that makes any sense. If you can feel that, you've got the right mindset going into it, and it applies to more than just work, but
Yeah,
it's having that mindset can shift so much. And that's something I've learned kind of recently, is just how much the right mindset just
yeah,
makes things almost magically seem to happen in your
yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah. No, definitely, definitely. And I think, like you said, with that experience, I mean, that can transmute into like work, like
Mm,
hospitality, buying shoes, going to a suit shop,
mm,
and I think it's something that I've found a lot when I worked in like a hotel, and it was very kind of fine dining, so
mm,
people were paying a lot of money for that, for a certain experience. And
mm,
I learned a lot in that area because I was thinking, well, people are paying a lot of money to come here. They're traveling down,
mm.
and when you stay in somewhere nice or you pay quite a bit of money, perhaps
Yeah.
going somewhere, you're going to want a certain experience. And I think you can go to some place sometimes, and if the waiter is like, "Oh, hi, there you go, here's your food," doesn't really,
Yeah.
it can turn you off from going back, and then you can then tell someone else about that place. And it just
Mm,
shows you how important it is, for businesses, for people working for businesses to
mm.
be passionate and happy about what they're doing, because it's so easy, I suppose, for people to leave bad reviews and for that
Yeah.
business to
Yeah.
lose money.
Yeah. This is the thing. It's like I think we can get into and part of my throwing myself into entrepreneurship for
Yeah.
so many years um was all about what did I learn? What was I able to
Mm.
take away? Um Sorry, I was a little
No,
bit
it's fine.
distracted for a second. A lot of what I threw myself into as a young entrepreneur and someone who was learning was, or I should say, ended up being about why do we do the things we do? Why do we think the ways we think
Mm.
in regards to other people? So I think this was the key for me, is so much of my life and so much of my thought process before this shift that I described ended up being about other people. I would place weight on
Yeah.
other people. I would place the significance. I would place how much value am I worth?
Mm.
I think as a leader, that's actually really cool. That kind of mindset isn't amazing for your own self value and your own worth, but
Mm.
it's a helpful tool to kind of start to understand, am I able to help or support my potential customers? And if you can get yourself to genuinely enjoy adding that value to other people's life, you're kind of good to go. Like, you've done a lot of the hard work, because a lot of the hard work in business, especially at the beginning, is mental. Is where your mental blocks, where your mental barriers, what are the things you're doing that will inevitably hold you back or make you kind of hold yourself back, right? Um, and how do you overcome that? That for me has always been the biggest question. But it's also became the biggest key. opening the kind of what is, if you had a hallway in front of you and you walked down this hallway and you could open any door you wanted, but you knew what was behind the door, which one would you open first? For me, the
Mm,
most important door to have the treasure, right? The most important door to have open first is this, let me get my mindset, or I should say my kind of state of mind, my perspective right, because everything else will start to flow from there. What kind of person I am, the kind of person that I am I a loving, supportive, caring person, or am I a scared, reactive, defensive, egotistic person? As two kind of polar opposite examples. Those different types of mindset will naturally lead to different things. Certain things will be very easy to do if you are this kind of giving, caring, empathetic person. Certain things would be a lot of effort to do. The same things, I should say, would be a lot of effort to do if you're a very selfish person. And when it comes to business, you can't be thinking about yourself. It isn't about you. It's about your customers, it's about your staff, it's about everyone but you. So, in a way, this really weird beginning to my career helped me kind of start to define and prepare for this really weird career path I was going to go down. This, sorry to say that. Let me say that again. This really weird life that I had, these weird experiences that I had, that helped prepare me in a really strange way for all of these kind of difficulties that are a natural part of this very weird career path that I kind of ended up choosing, right? Um,
mm,
kind of get what I mean by that. It's like
yeah,
it was this weird situation where I didn't realize why I just seemed to understand certain things and why certain
yeah,
things were hard, you know?
yeah. No, I think like it's such a great point like you made, and like you talked about mindset and how really mindset is kind of where it all kind of starts. Really, like if you don't have the right kind of mindset, then you
Mm,
might not make certain decisions. You're not going to hold yourself a certain way. And I think, like you said, in business, a lot of people, um, they're not thinking about their customers. They're not thinking about
yeah.
all of that, and they're just interested in how can they just line their own pockets in that, and that's it.
But you know what
And
I think's really kind of sad in a way is that I think that has come from society. Now,
yeah,
if you go back far enough, because we live in the West and in a capitalist kind of society, um, you could argue that it started with business, then permeated its way into society. But at the moment, what I feel like is we've got it coming from society, and so it naturally filters into business or
mm,
into any work that you do. You think if I work in an office job in the middle of London, um, and there's 400 other people in the building with me, might be seeing myself as someone who has to compete with all 399 other people in there. I might have a mindset that says, let me get ahead. Let me be weird and snaky and toxic to try to get ahead in my career. Forget all these other people. Whereas actually, collaboration is what adds the most value or so much value, especially in that kind of environment. I feel like in all sorts of ways, this weird, let me just think about myself and put myself first mentality is permeated into so many of the things that we do and the areas in which our mindset is important. And as far as my like personal stake, I guess, if you will, in supporting young leaders is concerned, that's a point I really want to hammer home. It's not about you. Having that empathy is wildly important. And in fact, a lot of the podcast episodes I've done so far, one of the main takeaways has been let's learn from this person we're hearing from today so that uh, we can kind of learn to be more empathetic and understand different or difficult points of view, because you can take that and apply it to your mindset, your way of thinking, and that will genuinely make your life, your business, even your relationship so much better.
yeah. No, I love that, and I think, like you said, like in like your podcast and in general life as well, wanting to provide value and to kind of be a service and serve, to help
Mm,
other people. And it's not all about, like me, and the money. It's,
mhm,
like, and there's that kind of, is that the right word? Contrast, like with society and
mm,
capitalism and business.
mm.
That, a lot of the times when when I sometimes speak to people, they'll be like, "Oh, um, how much money you make?" It's always about money,
Yeah.
and it's always like,
One of the first questions, right? It's always one of the first questions. Like
yeah,
we use it as a marker for success, which I
so you broke up for a second there. What did you just say?
oh,
A
I said
marker
no, I
for
feel you.
success.
We tend to use it as a marker for success, right?
Yeah.
Um Again, maybe it's because of the way our society is and the way we've grown up and how much value we seem to place on it, but it's always like it's a marker for success. And it's strange because if I'm used to 5,000 pounds a week being good and you make 4,000 pounds a week, which is amazing, then I might think you're not successful and I'll treat you that way, you know. I feel what you're trying to say, it's frustrating. I agree. I feel that completely. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, that's it. And I think, like, what does it matter? I think, if, say, you get a job that's 25 grand, um,
Mm,
and then you're not happy, then you might get one for
mm,
20, and you're happier, then you're happier, so it's going to be all better and well rounded for you, or
mm,
even if that's more, and I think people don't always
yeah.
ask, are you happy doing that? And I think
Mhm.
sometimes that may be because that's what their family, asked of them. That's what they
Yeah.
put on them, and then they're just kind of saying, doing the same
Yeah.
thing,
Just
which I
unconsciously
see
doing
happen.
the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I see that happen a lot. And I think, if you sometimes if you're getting more money in a position, some that may cause more stress for that person. Sometimes. So there are lots of different areas, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with being well and financially good. It's
Yeah.
great because that person can have probably more value, but they're if they're happy in what they're doing, they're passionate about it.
Yeah.
That money is going to ultimately follow, isn't it?
The exactly that's the thing is it's when we come back to this idea that your mindset seems to almost magically seem to make certain things follow it. That is one of them. So to me, I see if there was a wheel of like eight different things or like a platter of like eight different things and that I wanted in my life, right? Good relationships, money, property that a home I can live in, etc. All of these things tend to naturally come from having the right state of mind because all the actions you need to take to make all the things on that platter appear in your life, right? They flow naturally from the kind of way that you live. So one of my favorite, it's kind of a philosophical saying in a way, is that the energy you give to the world is the energy that you will get from the world. So if you notice
Mm,
yourself, like for example, if I'm the kind of person I was when I was young, a lot younger, and I'm really angry all the time, the way that I treat people, the way that I treat passersby, the way that I act, the way my body reacts to the kind of vibrations going on within it, all kinds of things will be both directly and indirectly, consciously and unconsciously affected by the energy I'm giving out, which means that people are going to act in certain ways or the world is going to react in certain ways that give me negative energy back, that give me
mm,
angry energy to be angry, because it's almost like if I'm being angry, it's like this is what I want, so it's what I'm going to get from the world. Whereas if you've got this a mindset that is fundamentally totally different to that, which says, let me treat people with compassion, let me be energetic, joyous, free, light, not so attached to lots of the wrong things, such as being too hyper focused on money as a good example. um, then you start to act in the ways that will mean that those things inevitably follow. that's the thing I found kind of so, in a way, ironic about our modern day life, because it's so, I feel like it's common and accepted to be stressed, depressed, unhappy, angry, whatever else, right? And it's almost like these are things we should feel because it's the kind of life we live. So in other words, it's, in a way, it comes back to a dichotomy. Like, we're expecting A plus B to equal C, as if there's nothing else in between, there's nothing else in the equation. But actually, it's almost like, um it's almost like if the equation for life was A plus B brackets X equals C, the brackets X is always going to be your perspective. It's always going to be your ability to be happy, to be joyous, or I should say, your emotional state and your state of mind. That will then
Mm.
multiply whatever else is going on. So if something awful happens, but you have the right state of mind, something else might come from it. You might, something much more magical, much more supportive, much more enjoyable might come from it. You might not only be able to better deal with them, but have more good things happen. Um, I've just kind of found that I've just found that so fascinating, because it's ironic and it's weird, and it's almost like we have this pandemic of everyone's got to be unhappy, but we don't, you know?
Mm. Yeah, no, definitely. I think it just reminds me of that movie, The Matrix, talking about this. I think
Yeah,
it's like we see everything that's going on around us, and like in the Matrix, like what we see going on around us in society is a bit like the Matrix, and people have to work. I get that, and I understand that, but you don't have to do what everyone else is doing, and it's okay to
mm,
not follow that script, and it's just a script in some sense of what we see in front of us. That's the way I see it,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it, it is kind of crazy when you think about it that people do, because in your work, you work for a long period. Most people work for a long time in their life, and then they retire, then do XYZ, and
hmm,
if people are happy doing that, fine, but you don't have to do that. You don't have to do certain jobs,
hmm,
and
yeah,
you can change it. If
hmm,
you want to do something, you can do that for a set amount of time, and then go, okay, I've done that. I'm going to do something else now.
yeah.
But
It's not fixed.
it's not fixed, and I think people. I mean, I won't go too much down the road, but I think like parenting, or how people are. Sometimes people do things for other people, don't listen to themselves,
Mm,
um, or feel under pressure to um, to do certain things, if that makes sense. So,
yeah,
but sometimes people get caught in traps, and then that's all they know sometimes, and
yeah,
then they're scared to try new things. So it's a bit of a paradox in some sense, but I think
yeah,
what it kind of comes down to, what we're like saying, is you have to be ultimately happy in what you
mm,
do, and like, if you're, and like what you said before, like what you give out is what you get back. If
yeah,
you're resentful or negative, you're going to
mm.
get that
Resentment back.
negativity
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you use the word scripting, because a big part of the kind of mental health side of a lot of what I explore, and we talk about it a bit on the podcast as well, is like the idea of rescripting. So during your formative years, which could be anywhere from, I think, the age of 4 to 12, but really is your whole childhood in a way, and your whole upbringing. Um, you get scripted into doing certain things. And actually, I think I've seen some research that says that children can be scripted to do or think certain things even as old as a few months old. That's where a lot of like racism, for example, comes from, is people when they were even 6 months old, who are now like 80, were treated or told or saw certain things they were too young to process, fully or understand at all because they were months or just a couple years old, but they saw it and got stuck in that. This is just what it is. It's too deep because that's what they got scripted to believe. And a lot of us are scripted to believe we aren't good enough. We need to keep working harder. Money is very important. So all these things we're saying, well, it's not great for people to think. There's not, but in a way, it's not 100% our fault because we've been scripted so deeply to believe certain things that are common in society. We've been scripted to put a lot of weight on making money, on being selfish, on not making other people happy. When it comes to business, we don't put much weight on thinking about other people. We tend to think about ourselves. We've kind of been scripted into these things, either directly or indirectly, by through some other kind of scripting, right? Indirectly. And so that means that if you want to make the biggest changes in your life, often what that means you need to do is rescript. So you mentioned like introspective times and reflection earlier. Something that is incredibly important to me is the concept of self introspection, which essentially means looking inwards, understanding the role that you had to play, and then figuring out what you can do next time. What can you learn from this to change what you do next time? The reason that's so powerful, especially over time, is because what you start to be able to do very naturally is understand your current scripts, interrogate them and why they're there, figure out what you actually want because it's probably not whatever your current script is, and then tell yourself what the script you'd rather have is, and figure out how to actually put the work into doing the rescripting. You can do all of that with this self introspection kind of skill. But at the end of the day, what that comes down to is you need to want to do that. You need to want to be self introspective. You need to want to rescript. If you don't know that or don't know there's an area you need to rescript in, fair enough. It's so unconscious, so deep in your subconscious or unconscious that you can't figure it out. But now that you've heard conversations like this, or once you've been presented with the fact that it's the case, at that point,
Mm.
there's kind of no excuse in a way. Does that make sense? It's important as
Yeah.
soon as you know you need to do it to build that skill of self introspection and build that ability to figure out what your scripts are and when to rescript, you know?
Mm. Yeah, no, I think that's really, really true, and I really agree with you. And I think people, it's like those layers of an onion, isn't it? And within that, there's all those
Yeah.
scripts that kind of go into that. And I think you can change your scripts, as you said, and you have to kind of go to that place in yourself, and really be quite introspective and to
Mm,
really go into it. And you have to accept, I think ultimately that this is going on. These are things I need to change, and I think
yeah.
you have to take full responsibility.
Mm,
And you mentioned like behaviors and growing up in. I mean, you can't choose who your parents are or what place you
mm,
land in, but like you said with the scripts, you can choose what you want to do with
mm.
the things you've
Yeah.
taken from it. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
And
that's another one of my favorite sayings, right? Is
yeah,
like you can't control the ocean, but you can learn to ride the waves. You
yeah,
can't
yeah,
control what life throws at you, you know, but
mm,
you can control how you choose to react.
yeah,
Thing that I think is important to kind of uncover within that is like a lot of what we do happens without us really thinking about it. The vast majority of
mm,
what we do happens without us actually thinking about it consciously. And what the draw one of the biggest drivers behind those things that happen so subconsciously or even unconsciously, they often come from what I call storylines, right? Storylines of the mind. So we get used to telling ourselves certain stories about ourselves. Um, for example, because I grew up in kind of conditions and an environment where I was belittled by my own family. I was kind of belittled by the world in a way because we were very poor and sometimes even experienced homelessness. I didn't have much of a support network when I was growing up either.
mm,
Um, most of this is only possible because I was born in LA, and you can kind of hear the accent. I'm from the States, where a lot of this stuff is even worse there than it is in the UK, right? Um, and
Yeah.
and and that meant the narrative that I was picking up as a young person, as a child, I should say, was even more impacted. So once I started to become a young adult, and then eventually into being an adult or a teenager before that, I should say, growing up into this process, it was sort of like, I believe that I am worthless. I believe that I am not good enough and that I never will be. I believe that I don't matter because that's what the world taught me. But that's what I thought the world taught me. That was in like an interpretation of what was going on in the world around me, and I thought that that was what it was teaching me. That it was then my choice to take that and turn it into a storyline. Now, the storyline is what I tell myself. So if someone says to me, you are worthless, you are not good enough, I can choose to say, your opinion doesn't matter. But
Mm,
what happens in these really um, kind of uh, important phases of our youth, right? These formative years,
mm,
is we don't realize we can just say no. We think that this is what is. So instead of saying no, I'm choosing not to believe that narrative you just told me, I then start to go, is that really the case? And then what I'll do is whenever something happens that might prove it, I'll start to say it to myself again. So I'll go, oh shit, I'm so worthless. That's why this person didn't like me, or that's why I didn't get the job, or that's why I got rejected by a girl, or whatever. Growing up all throughout your life, you find ways to tell yourself, uh, I don't matter. I'm not good enough. I'm this. I'm that. I'm not pretty. I'm whatever your storylines are. Um, that that you get shown something and then you choose to take it on as a storyline, and it repeats. It repeats and repeats and repeats. That's the important thing to understand about the storylines of the mind. Is there are things we learned, or we learned in the sense that we learned to think they were true because we chose to make them true, or something else ended up making us think they were true, and then we was going. And so it's this cycle. It is a destructive cycle. And the thing about cycles is that they can only be broken from the inside. A cycle is something you need to choose to get out of and change one of the things in the cycle that would have led to the next thing in the cycle. So if me being really kind of unhealthy, let's say me eating unhealthy, comes from, let's say I've got a cycle where I don't like myself, so I eat unhealthy, then I don't look the way I want to look, and then that's a reason to hate myself. That's a small self-deprecating cycle as a result of a storyline of the mind where I believe I'm not worth liking. There has to be something within that cycle that changes. That's the nature of a cycle. A cycle can only be broken from within. Once I've realized I'm telling myself a storyline, it's up to me to change the story and to change the actions that would have led to or that exacerbate that story. And eventually, what starts to happen is the story becomes weaker. It doesn't disappear because it's deep, but it starts to fade. New storylines start to be the ones we adopt. And that's what I think is so beautiful about being human in a way, because we have the ability to adapt stories in the first place. And it can be very unhealthy. 99% of the time, it feels really unhealthy. But it can also be this really beautiful catalyst for change, this beautiful conduit for bringing, expressing ourselves and bringing our ability to change the world out into the world. And I think all those things are really positive. I just really wish more leaders, and actually just everyone from every profession, background, skill, interest, could kind of just take that on board a little bit more, and let them be themselves out to the world, because the world and you will only ever be better off for it.
Yeah, no, it's really powerful, isn't it? And I think like what you mentioned, like, with
Mm,
your life experiences, like growing up and, not feeling like you were kind of worth anything, based on what's happening and being homeless. I mean, that they're really difficult times to go through. And I think like for you
mm,
to to get through that and then to understand, and as you grew up, like they were just that wasn't my reality, that wasn't, who I am. That was, you know, okay, a time and an experience that you was in, but it doesn't mean to say that you're worthless or that's always going to be the way.
yeah,
But it's like you said, the mind creates these cycles, we create habits, and so we kind of almost paint a picture as to, kind of why things are the way they are. And then when you're especially when you're
yeah,
younger, when people say things are negative, I think because
mm,
you're a bit like a chicken out of the egg when you're a teenager or a kid, and
mhm,
you take it literally
yeah,
sometimes when people say that to you, and then you can think, oh well, they've spotted something in me that must be true, and then you create that cycle, and then you start doubting yourself, and then it's just a downward spiral, and
yeah,
you have to kind of pick yourself out of it. Sometimes that that happens over time, and then you have to do the work. But it's
yeah,
it's what you do with that experience, isn't it? You have used
yeah,
your
that's
experience
yeah,
to propel yourself forward,
yeah,
and do well and want to do well and to help other people. And you know, like I said, more people should do that. They should
mm.
see their experiences and use that and share it.
That's that, and I think that's one of the it's one of the it's both a curse and a blessing in a way of the way these storylines work because in a
Yeah.
way if you're watching or listening to this and you're younger, in a way you have an advantage here because as deeply rooted as those storylines are, or sorry, as deeply rooted as you think your storylines might be, they could always get worse. If a storyline gets more powerful the more you say it,
Mm.
and you've been saying it for 10 years, which sounds like a long time, but then someone else has been saying their stories to themselves for 30 years, that's crazy. That's such a
Yeah.
huge difference. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's also why it's important to interrogate them now. Here's one of the best pieces of advice I've ever been given.
Mm.
The best time to do anything is now. We plan and we visualize, we look to the future, we reflect on the past, and those things are great. But
Mm.
often people won't just do those healthy, constructive things. They will actually live in the past or live in the future. But the thing about the past and the future is they're not happening, which means they don't even exist. Any one of us could not be here tomorrow. So the best time to do anything is right now. I mean, you could even say to me, if I
Mm.
was an office manager and I was planning like the Christmas celebration event for the office, and you asked me, when should we what date should we have our Christmas dinner for the office or our Christmas lunch event, and it's summer, I'll go, well, the best time is now. And you look at me like, well, it's a Christmas. What do you mean it's summer? But I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, but that's a different question because the best time to do anything is now because we can't guarantee everyone who wants to join the Christmas dinner will even be here during Christmas. Do you know what I mean? It's like the best time to do anything is now.
Yeah.
That to me is an invaluable um, over time. Then you must be able to um, to understand that now is the best time to change them. Now is the best time for that self introspection and that reflection. Now is the best time to interrogate them and try your best to shift them. And it's a long, hard process. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is easy or that you just do it magically.
Mm.
Um, but one of the other best pieces of advice I ever got was to just start kind of as a part of the best time to do anything is now. There's no point in spending loads of time thinking about it and researching. Just start. And all those steps in this really difficult process will come.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I think it's so powerful, isn't it? And it's kind of simply said, but it's quite complex things. For some people, like you said, they're caught up in the past, they're in the future, and like all that we have is in the now. And you know, people, I think, overthink things sometimes, and then they don't act on the now, or they think, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to do it next week, and then, like before you know it, 2 years have gone by, and like you just need to start and just do it now. And even if that's a little percent, bit by bit, and you get into the routine of it, whatever it is,
Yeah.
like whether that's working out, going for a
Mm.
run, doing a podcast, doing videos. I always say to people, if you
Simple
struggle
things,
doing,
yeah, can do a
yeah,
lot.
and if you want to do a video, you don't have to do a 20-minute video or 5 minute. You could do 59. You could do a video for 30 seconds. Do you know what I mean? Or a podcast for 20 minutes or whatever.
Mm.
And then before you know it, you're doing. We've been doing what? You've been going for about an
Something.
hour now. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Doing something is always better than doing nothing. Um,
yeah,
because so I just keep going. I feel like I can just keep going. But one of my other favorite pieces of advice is um,
yeah,
uh, doing something will always have a higher chance of getting you what you want than doing nothing. So
mm,
if what I want today is to meet a new person, but I don't really have the energy to go socialize with people or meet new people, just going for a walk down the street is much more likely to get me to meet a new person, even during COVID, than just staying at home or just sitting in bed or
yeah,
just sitting at my
definitely,
desk, right? There's
definitely,
a 0% chance of something new happening if I stay in bed. There is a more than 0% chance of something happening if I do something. If I go out for that walk, there's a more
mm,
than 0% chance. It's it's like a zero. It's zero versus more than zero. It doesn't matter how small the percentage is because it is more than zero, and that's why
yeah,
to me, just trying is always such a crucial kind of skill to have in a way. That part of the
mm,
confidence that lets you go, fuck it, let me just try. That is
yeah.
powerful.
It makes you want to do more of that as well. Once you
Yeah.
start clear.
Adam, can you hear me? You have cut out for me completely. Well, that's awkward. I hope this gets cut out. If it doesn't, hey Adam, can you hear me? You're on mute at the moment, so I can't hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you. My phone overheated. That's why it
Oh,
just broke
sugar.
up.
Weird.
Um, yeah,
Well, have fun
but
cutting that out.
yeah, but no, it's been a pleasure. I just want to say it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast.
100%. Thank you for having me, man.
I
It's
think
been
we,
fun.
yeah, no, it definitely really has, and I think we touched base on a lot of great topics that are really important. And thank you for sharing your story and
Mm,
providing um, the knowledge on the podcast, and
yeah.
for sharing your experience. And
Yeah.
I wish you all the best in everything that you do.
Thank you.
I love what you do. Where can people find you on like your
Yeah.
podcast, social
Yeah.
media, that kind of thing?
Yeah, two main things. Number one is Instagram. It's just my name at 7.jacobs. Um, all of my content, announcements, sometimes new opportunities for various different kind of people comes up on there as well. So please go give me a follow on there. And number two is my podcast called Lost and Searching. If you kind of enjoy conversations like these, but also kind of more things like that are really raw and about kind of mental health. That's a mental health podcast focused towards young leaders, and you can find that anywhere you find podcasts, Lost and Searching. So those two places. It'd be amazing. Look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, awesome. No, and I highly recommend that. I was on your podcast and I really had a great time. And
Thank
you know,
you.
I like your episode as well. You're welcome. But I hope you have a great day and all the best.
You too, man. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
You're welcome. You're welcome.